Not afraid to die if we can all be together. Chapter 2 of Class 11, written by Gordon Cook and Alan East. The, the story that we are going to know, it is all about the adventure. The family had a dream just like it, many years back. James Captain Cook had made a voyage around the world. So that inspiration and the motivation which he got as a narrator had a desire to complete, like him, the journey around the world. So let us talk about the journey, but before, n- n- know what are the things happened in the journey. Here is the image of the boat, wooden boat. It is not a ship, but wooden boat. So you have to know the particular name. What does it called? These are the indication because in the story you will be getting the name, and you should know that these different leveled or by the name these things are called in of a boat. So let us know the inferred meaning of the given phrases from the context. First of all, here, chapter 2, we're not afraid to die if we can all be together. Gordon Cook and Alan East. Let us know few things about them. Gordon Cook and Alan East co-authored the widely studied adventure story "The Wave", known for its vivid depiction of a dangerous sea journey. Their work often focuses on survival and human resilience in extreme conditions. So, this is also a part of adventure and quite very interesting. The hardship and the survival focus, how to survival, we will be enjoying quite a lot. Before that, we will know the inferred meaning of these phrases that is used in the context of this story. Honing our seafaring skill. It means that improving or perfecting our sailing abilities. And the context that it connected to these phrases is that the narrator and his wife spent 16 years. You can find out the sentence given in one of the passages. The narrator and his wife spent 16 years preparing for their voyage, indicating practiced and refined their sailing skills extensively. Second, pinpricks vast ocean. It means that small, barely noticeable spots on a large expanse of water. And the context connected to this phrase is refers to the two small islands in the immense Indian Ocean, which are tiny in comparison to the vastness of the sea. Omni, Omnious silence. It means a troubling or foreboding Foreboding, foreboding, quiet, that suggests something bad is about to happen. And the context which is used in the book is that the silence before the arrival of the enormous wave, indicating the calm before the impending storm and disaster. A tousled means a head with messy, disheveled hair. Disheveled. Disheveled hair. Context here it means refers Jonathan's appearance when he comes to ask for a hug, showing the rough conditions and stress the children have endured. Mayday calls means that emergency distress signals sent out to request immediate, and the context connecting to this phrase is that the distress signals sent by the crew to seek rescue, which were unfortunately no response in the remote area where they were stranded. This is all about the inferred meanings from the context. Now we shall move with the story and the description expressed or written by the narrator. As usual, I used to advise open your textbook and just keep in front and tally and have eye contact, focus line by line with the expression and discussion for the deepest understanding. And if there are some glitches with my voice, you can easily identify and correct yourself. And some points you can even write down as your personal note. So, in July 1976, my wife Marie, son Jonathan, six, daughter Suzanne, seven, and I set from Plymouth, England to take the round the world voyage made 2 years earlier by Captain James Cook. For the longest time, Murray, a 37-year-old businessman, had dreamt of sailing in the wake of the famous explorer. For the past 16 years, we had spent all our leisure time honing our seafaring skills in British waters. So here in this paragraph, the narrator is telling us that it was in the month of July 1976, a man, that means narrator himself, along with his wife Marie and with their two young children, Jonathan, 6 years of age, Suzanne, 7 years of age, set sail from Plymouth, England. Their goal was to recreate a history about the round of the world voyage, just like the Captain James Cook had completed 200 years earlier. The man was of, that means the narrator was of a 37 years of old businessman, and his wife had long dreamed of following in Cook's footsteps. For 16 years, they had been practicing and improving their sailing skills in British waters to prepare for this adventurous journey around the world. Our boat, Wave Walker, a 23-meter, 30-ton wooden hulled beauty, had been professionally built, and we had spent months fitting it out and testing it in the roughest weather we could find. So, here in this passage, the narrator is telling us that the family's boat named was Wave Walker was a large one, 23-meter long. The length of that boat, wooden boat, was 23 meter and it weighed 30-ton wooden vessel. It had been built by professionals and they spent several months preparing it for their journey. That means voyage. Journey and voyage also having several meaning, but the author have used here, okay, as a voyage. Remember, when we do sailing in water, we used to say not journey but voyage. So, to make sure the boat was ready, they tested it in the harshest weather condition they could find in the water of England. The first leg of our planned 3 year 1,05,000 kilometer journey passed pleasantly as we sailed down the west coast of Africa to Cape Town, where before heading east we took on two crewmen, that is from America, that is Larry Wiggle and Swiss Herb Sigler, to help us tackle one of the world's roughest seas, the Southern Indian Ocean. Here in this passage, the narrator is telling us about the first part of their planned 3 year 1,05,000 kilometer voyage went smoothly as they sailed along the west coast of Africa to Cape Town. Before continuing east further, they brought on two additional crew members, an American named Larry Wiggle and a Swiss man named Herb Sigler. They joined to help navigate through the dangerous southern Indian Ocean known for its rough seas. On our second day out of Cape Town, we began to encounter strong gales. For the next few weeks, they blew continuously. Gales did not worry me, but the size of the waves was alarming, up to 50 meters as high as our main mast. Here, the narrator says that on the second wing, Cape Town, the crew faced strong gales that continued for several weeks. While the gales didn't bother the narrator, the huge waves, reaching up to 15 meters in height, as tall as the boat's main mast, were very concerning. December 25th found us 3,500 kilometers of Cape Town. Despite atrocious we had a wonderful holiday complete with a Christmas tree. New Year's Day saw no improvement in the weather. We reasoned that it had to change, and it changed for the worse. So here in this passage again the narrator is reminding us that by December 25th they were they were completing their voyage ahead 3,500 kilometers east of Cape Town, facing terrible weather. Despite this, they enjoyed a nice Christmas celebration with a tree. However, the weather didn't improve by New Year's Day and they hoped it would get better soon. Instead, it got even worse. On January 2nd, the waves were gigantic. We were sailing with only a small storm jib and were 8 knots. As the ship rose to the top, we could see endless and seas rolling towards us, and the screaming of the wind and spray was full to the ears. To slow the boat, we dropped the storm jib and lashed a heavy mooring rope in a loop across the stern. Then we double lashed everything, went through our life raft drill, attached lifelines, donned oilskins and life jackets, and so here in this paragraph or passage, the narrator is telling us that on the morning of January 2nd, the waves had grown huge. The boat was moving quickly but with only a small storm sail. Each time they climbed a wave, they saw more massive waves ahead, with the wind and spray so intense that it hurt their ears. Slow the boat, they took down the sail and tied a heavy rope at the back. They secured everything, practiced emergency drills, put on lifelines, rain gear, and life jackets, and wait for what was to come next. The indication of impending disaster about 6 p.m. with an ominous silence, the wind dropped and the sky immediately grew dark. Then came a groaning roar, and an enormous cloud towered aft of the ship. With horror, I realized that it was not a cloud but a wave like no other I had ever seen. It appeared perfect and almost twice the height of other waves, with a frightful crest. So, here in this passage, the narrator is telling us that around 6 p.m., the first sign of disaster appeared. The wind suddenly stopped and the sky turned dark. Soon they heard a growling roar and saw a massive cloud like sheep behind the boat. To their horror, it wasn't a cloud, it was a giant wave, much taller than the others and nearly vertical with a terrifying breaking top. The roar increased to a thunder as the stern moved up the face of the wave, and for a moment I thought we might ride over it. But then a tremendous explosion deck. A torrent of green white water broke over the ship. My head into the wind, and I was away flying overboard and sinking waves. I accepted my that, and as I was losing consciousness, I felt quite peaceful. So here telling us that as the wave approached him, the noise grew even louder and the back of the boat began to climb the wave. For, for a moment, the narrator thought that they might make it over, but then a massive crash hit the deck. A huge wave of water slammed the ship, and the narrator was thrown overboard, hitting his head. As he sank into the water, he thought he was going to die and felt a strange sense of peace as he lost consciousness. Unexpectedly, my head popped out of the water a few meters away. Wave Walker was near raising her masts along almost horizontal. Then a wave hurled her upright. My lifeline. I grabbed the guard rails and sailed through the air into Wave Walker's main. Subsequent waves tossed me around the deck like a rag doll. My left ribs cracked, my mouth filled with blood and broken teeth. I found the wheel, lined up the next wave, and hung on. The narrator is telling us again unexpectedly the head surface of his, okay, from the water it came, okay. He saw Wave Walker nearly tipping over with its masts almost flat. A wave then pushed the boat upright and his lifeline pulled him back to the boat. He grabbed the rails and was to the main boom. The force of the wave tossed him around the deck, cracking his ribs and his mouth with blood and broken teeth. Despite his injuries, he managed to reach the wheel, steer the boat to face the next wave, and hold on tightly. Water, water everywhere. I could feel that the ship had water below, but I dared not abandon the wheel to investigate. Suddenly, the front hatch was open and Mary appeared. "We're sinking," she screamed. "The decks are smashed. We're full of water." So his passage, the narrator could feel that water was flooding the ship, but he couldn't leave the wheel to check. Suddenly his wife Mary appeared through the front hatch, yelling, shouting, "We're sinking!" She told him that the deck was destroyed and the boat was filled with water. "Take the wheel!" I shouted as I scrambled for the hatch. Larry and Herb were pumping like madmen. Broken timbers hung at crazy angles. The whole starboard side buckled inwards, clothes, crockery, charts, tins, and toys slushed about in deep water. So here the narrator shouted for Maurice to take the wheel while he hurried to hatch. Inside, Larry and Herb were frantically pumping, continuously pumping out. The boat was badly damaged with broken wood at odd angles and the right side caving in. Items like clothes, dishes, maps, cans, and toys were floating in the rising water inside the deck. I half swam, half crawled into the children's cabin. "Are you all right?" I asked. "Yes," they answered from an upper bunk, "but my head hurts a bit," said Sue, pointing to a big bump above her eyes. I had no time to worry about bumped heads. Here again the narrator is telling us that the narrator swam and crawled into the children's cabin and asked if they were all right. They replied that they were fine, but Sue, that means Susie, means Sue here means Suzanne. So what the narrator is telling us here, okay, that uh, the children replied that they were fine, but Suzanne mentioned her head was hurt from a bump above her eyes. He didn't have time to worry about her injury, as there were more urgent issues to address. So the situation was thrilling here, as the damages had happened to the boat. After finding a hammer, screws, and canvas, I struggled back on deck. With the starboard side bashed open, we were taking water with each wave that broke over us. If I couldn't make some repairs, we would surely sink. So here, the alarming situations the narrator was facing, that here it described that after finding a hammer, screws and canvas, the narrator made his way back on deck. The right side of the boat was damaged and taking on water with every wave that hit it. He knew that if he couldn't fix the damage, the boat would sink. Somehow I managed to stretch canvas and secure waterproof hatch covers across the gaping holes. Some water continued to stream below, but most of being deflected over the more problems arose when our hand pumps started to block up with floating around the cabins and the electric short-circuited, the water level tightened back on deck. I found that our two spare hand pumps had been wrenched overboard along with the forestay uh, dinghies and the main anchor. So here, the new problems the narrator was facing that came up when hand pumps became clogged with debris floating around the cabins, and the electric pump stopped working. The water level was rising dangerously. When the narrator returned to the deck, he discovered that their two spare hand pumps had been washed overboard along with the forestay sail, the jib and dinghies, and the main anchor. Then I remembered we had another electric pump under the bathroom floor. I connected it to an out pipe and was thankful to find that it worked. So here the narrator had remembered that they had another electric pump stored under the floor of the chart room. He connected it to an outflow pipe and was relieved, was happy to discover that it was working properly. The night dragged on with an endless, bitterly cold routine of pumping, steering, and working the radio. We were getting no replies to our Mayday calls, which was not surprising in this remote corner of the world. Here, the narrator tells us that the night they spent filled with the cold and exhausting task of pumping water, steering the boat, and trying to use the radio for help, but they received no responses to their maydays, which wasn't surprising given how isolated they were in that part of the world. Sue's head had swollen alarmingly. She had two enormous black eyes, and now she showed us a deep cut on her arm. When asked why she hadn't made more of her injuries before this, she replied, I didn't want to worry you when trying to save us all. So here in this paragraph, we see little bit emotional connection and deep relation bonding daughter is having towards her father. So Sue The narrator is telling here that Sue's head had swollen significantly, giving her two large black eyes, and she now revealed a deep cut on her arm. When the narrator asked why she hadn't mentioned her injuries earlier, she said that she didn't want to worry him when he was trying to save them all. So this is the reply, and this is the end of the first part of the voyage in the boat. Now we'll move with the second part. By morning on January 3rd, the pumps had the water level sufficiently under control for us to take 2 hours in rotation, but we still had a tremendous somewhere below the waterline, and on checking I found that nearly all the boat's main ribs frames were smashed down the knee keel. In fact, there was nothing holding up a whole section of the starboard hull except a few cupboard partitions. So here the narrator, after the day they had spent the night in difficulty, on 3rd January morning, he had seen that the pumps had managed to reduce the water level enough for the crew to take 2 hours to rest rotation-wise. However, there was still a significant leak below the waterline. Upon inspection, the narrator discovered that most of the boat's main frames were damaged down to the keel, leaving a large section of right side of the hull supported only by a few cupboard partitions. We had survived for 15 hours since the wave hit, but Wave Walker wouldn't hold together enough for us to reach Australia. I checked out charts and calculated that there were two small islands 100 kilometers to the east. The one of them, Isle Amsterdam. Isle Amsterdam was a French scientific base. Our only hope was to reach these pinpricks in the vast ocean, but unless the wind and seas abated so we could hoist sail, our chances would be slim indeed. The great wave had put our auxiliary engine out of action. So here the narrator is telling us that they had arrived for 15 hours since the wave had struck, but Wave Walker was not likely to last long enough to reach Australia. The narrator checked the charts and found two small islands a few hundred kilometers to the east, one of which, Isle Amsterdam, had a French scientific base. Their only hope was to reach these tiny islands in the vast ocean. However, without calmer winds and seas to rise the sails, the chances of making it were very slim. The massive wave had also damaged their auxiliary engine, rendering it useless. On 4th January, after 36 hours of continuous pumping, we reached the last few centimeters of water. Now we had only to keep pace with the water still coming in. We could not set any sail on the main mast. Pressure on the rigging would simply pull the damaged section of the hull apart, so we hoisted the storm jib and headed for where I thought the two islands were. Murray found some corned beef and cracker biscuits, and we ate our first meal in almost 2 days. So here the narrator is telling us that what happened on the 4th of January. So on 4th of January, after 36 hours of non-stop pumping, they managed to lower the water level to just a few centimeters. Their goal was now to keep up with the water still coming in. They couldn't use the main sail because it would put too much strain on the damaged hull, so they raised the storm sail instead and headed toward where they believe the two islands were located. Murray found some corned beef and crackers, and they finally had their first meal in almost 2 days. But our respite was short-lived. At 4 p.m., clouds began building up behind us. Within the hour, back to 40 knots, and the seas were getting higher. The weather continued to deteriorate throughout the night, and by dawn on January 5th, our situation was again despair is reminding us, however, their brief period of relief didn't last long. At 4 p.m., dark clouds formed behind them, and within an hour the wind picked up to 40 knots, causing the waves to rise again. The weather continued to worsen throughout the night, and by dawn on January 5th, their situation had become desperate once more time. When I went to When I went in to comfort the children, John asked, "Daddy, are we going to die?" I tried to assure him that we could make it. "But, Daddy," he went on, "we aren't afraid of dying if we can all be together, you and Mummy, Sue and I." So here the narrator is telling that when the narrator went to comfort his children, Jonathan happened to ask, "Daddy, are they going to die?" The narrator tried to reassure, comfort him that they could survive. Jonathan then replied again, "But, Daddy, they aren't afraid of dying if they can all be together." Concluding, mother, father, sister, and himself. So hope is there, and strong relationship bonding is there. Together, again, I'll repeat this line: we aren't afraid of dying if we can all be together. You and Mummy, Sue and I. See how encouraging, understanding, or making the father realize that they are all together in the difficult situation of the voyage. So hope is still there. United we stand, that means divided we fall. So there is a very strong relation among the uh, children and the parents. So all of us, we should also have this type of strong relation with our parents and family members. I could find no words with which to respond, but I left the children's cabin determined to fight the sea with everything I had. To protect the weakened starboard side, I decided to heave to with the undamaged port hull facing the oncoming waves, using an improvised sea anchor of heavy nylon rope and two 22-liter plastic barrels of paraffin. So here the narrator is telling us that he was unable to find the right words to comfort his children. The narrator left their cabin determined to fight against the sea. He got the strength, inner power, and he moved forward for how to protect damages again that would be facing by the strong waves. So, to protect the damaged right side of the boat, he decided to position it with the undamaged left side facing the sea waves. He used a makeshift sea anchor made from heavy nylon rope and two 22-liter plastic barrels filled with paraffin to help stabilize the boat. That evening, Murray and I sat together holding hands as the motion of the ship brought more and more water in through the broken planks. We both felt the end was very near. So here the narrator is saying that that evening his wife Murray and the narrator himself sat together holding hands together as the boat continued to take on more water through the damaged planks. They both sensed and understand that their situation was becoming increasingly dire and felt that the end was very close to them. But Wave Walker rode out the storm, and by the morning of 6th January, with the wind easing, I tried to get a reading on the sextant. Back in the chart room, I work on wind speeds, changes of course, drift, and current in an effort to calculate our position. The best I could determine was that we were somewhere in 150,000 kilometers of ocean looking for a 65-kilometer wide island. So the narrator describes that Wave Walker managed to survive the storm, and by the morning of January 6th, with the wind starting to calm down, the narrator attempted to take a reading with the sextant back in the chart room. He calculated with wind speeds, course changes, drift, and current to figure out their position. Ultimately, he determined that they were lost in a vast ocean of 150,000 kilometers while searching for a 65-kilometer wide island. While I was thinking, Sue, moving painfully, joined me. The left side of her head was now very swollen, and her blackened eyes narrowed to slits. She gave me a card she had made. While here the narrator is telling that while the narrator was deep in thought, Sue, his daughter, moving with difficulty, came to join him. The left side of her head was very badly swollen up, and her blackened eyes were narrowed to slits. Was not able to see. She handed him a card she had made. On the front, she had drawn caricatures of Mary, her mother, and me, father, with the words, here, here are some funny people. Did they make you laugh? I laughed a lot. I laughed a lot as well. Inside was a message. Oh, how I love you both. So this card is to say thank you and let's hope for the best. Somehow we had to make it. So, second inspiration, motivation getting from his daughter Sue. So, here the narrator is telling that on the front of the card, on the front of the card which he received from his daughter Sue, had drawn funny caricatures of her parents and wrote, "Here are some funny people. Did they make him laugh?" I and the narrator laughed a lot as well. Inside, she expressed her love for them with the message that, "Oh, how I love you both." So, this card is to say thank you and let's hope for the best. The narrator felt a sense of determination that they had to find a way to survive. So, this is the second part of inspiration. Now we have ended. Now we'll move to the another part. Let's see and understand and enjoy their adventure. I checked and rechecked my calculations. We had lost our main compass and I was using a here which had not been corrected for magnetic variation. I made an allowance for this and another estimate of the influence of the westerly currents which flow through this part of the Indian Ocean. So here the narrator carefully reviewed his calculation multiple times. They had lost their main compass, so he was using a spare one that hadn't been adjusted for magnetic variation. He accounted for this and also estimated the impact of the westerly currents in that part of the Indian Ocean. About 2 p.m., I went on deck and asked Larry to steer a course of 185 degree. If we were lucky, I told him with a conviction I did not feel he could expect to see the island at about 5 p.m. So here the narrator is telling that at 2 p.m., around 2 p.m., the narrator went on deck and asked Larry to change the direction. That means to steer the boat on a course of 185-degree. He told Larry that if they were lucky, he should expect to see the island around 5 p.m., although he didn't truly feel confident about it. Then, with a heavy heart, I went below, climbed on my bunk, and amazingly dozed off. When I woke, it was 6 p.m. and growing dark. I knew we must have missed the island, and with the sail we had left, we couldn't hope to beat back into the westerly winds. So here, with a heavy heart, the narrator went back below the deck, climbed onto his bunk, and surprisingly, he fell asleep. When he woke up, it was 6 p.m. and getting dark. He realized they must have missed the island, and with the remaining sail they had, they wouldn't be able to sail against the westerly winds. At that moment a tousled head appeared by my bunk. "Can I have a hug?" Jonathan asked. Sue was right behind him. "Why am I getting a hug now?" I asked. "Because you are the best daddy in the whole world and the best captain," my son replied. "Not today, John. I'm afraid." "Why, you must be," said Sue in a matter-of-fact voice. "You found the island." "What?" I shouted. "It's out there in front of us." They coursed as big as a battleship. I rushed on deck and gazed with relief at the stark outline of Isle Amsterdam, it was only a bleak piece of volcanic rock with little vegetation, the most beautiful island in the world. So here the narrator is telling that at that moment, while he was sleeping, Jonathan appeared while he was sleeping and just awoken at 6 p.m. Jonathan appeared by the bunk and asked, could they have a hug? Sue was right behind Jonathan. The narrator asked why he was getting a hug now, and Jonathan replied, because he was the best daddy in the whole world and the best captain too. The narrator responded, not today, John. He was afraid that they are again lost. So Sue then again said, matter, in fact, reality, that you have found the island, and that surprised the narrator. With this excitement, the narrator shouted, what? They both excitedly told them, and it out there in front of them, as big as a battleship. So the narrator rushed on the deck and felt relief as he saw the outline of Isle Amsterdam. Though it was just a bleak piece of volcanic rock with little vegetation, it looked like the most beautiful island in the whole world to him. We anchored offshore for the night. Next morning, all 28 inhabitants of the island cheered as they helped us ashore. With land under my feet again, my thoughts were full of Larry and Herbie, cheerful and optimistic, the dearest stress and of Mary, who stayed at the wheel for all those crucial hours. Most of all, I thought of a 7-year-old girl who did not want us to worry about a head injury, which subsequently took 6 operations to remove a blood clot between skin and skull, and of a 6-year-old boy who was not afraid to die. So here the narrator is concluding that finally they anchored offshore for the night with Isle Amsterdam. The next morning, all 28 residents of that island and welcomed as they helped them come ashore. With solid ground beneath his feet again, the narrator reflected on Larry and Herb, with whom they remained cheerful and optimistic despite the dire situation, as well as Mary, his wife, who had stayed at the wheel during the critical hours. Most importantly, he thought about his 7-year-old daughter, who had tried not to worry them about her head injury, which later required 6 minor operations to remove a recurring blood clot, and his 6-year-old son, who had shown no fear of death. So finally, we came to end of our adventure, and entire family with the crew member, they landed safely on the island of Isle Amsterdam. Isle Amsterdam. So the moral that we learn from here is that in the face of overwhelming adversity, in the face of the overwhelming adversity, hope, determination, and family support can lead to miraculous survival. So this is the most probably moral lesson that we learn, and you also can have your own morals that reflect with the adventure. What this adventurous chapter it is teaching you after all. You can relate and connect to your life with the present situation wherever you are. And if you like, then also share to those students who are away from this type of explanation, or uh, as you enjoy, you know that you should also help others to understand the chapter and enjoy the chapter just like you. Then let me sum up that in short, about entire story is like this: that in July 1976, the narrator and his wife Murray and their children set sail to replicate whom Captain Cook's voyage. After encountering several gales and a monstrous wave, their boat, Wavewalker, was severely damaged. Despite battling flooding and losing vital equipments, they used an improvised sea anchor and managed to stay afloat. On January 6th, they miraculously spotted Isle Amsterdam, a small island. They were rescued and welcomed by the islanders' inhabitants, reflecting on their ordeal and the bravery of his family. So, this is all about the chapter. Hope you enjoyed the adventure of this story and help others also to get benefit of this explanation. Thank you. Again, I remind, read and revise for deepest understanding and everlasting to your memory. Thank you. Have a nice day. We shall meet next with the next topic. Thank you.